This piece is called 8 Acts of Love. My love smells the scent of a rose between petal and thorn, born as one whole. The invisible air uplifts my body in a moment of beauty before descent. My love smells. My love feels the resonance of a bird's chorus, amplified to reach heaven, vibrating my inner home, filling one abandoned tree, filling one abandoned tree, standing alone in a concrete desert, a garden destroyed. My love feels. My love sits, bodies working through tortured equations. 1 foot, 1 shoe, 1 foot, 1 shoe. 2 breaths of time, 2 breaths of time. Bodies working in tortured equations, crossing borders countrywide, crossing borders countrywide, in rocks filled with whispers between day and night, here in a circle of time, here in a circle of time. My love sits. My love flows under a carpet of yellow leaves, tracing the natural flow of a stream as it snakes through a woodland, a passage of knowledge in function alone, a passage of knowledge in function alone, a body in water, a body in water that soothes the aches of an aging soul, hoping to find peace in sleep, hoping to find peace in sleep. My love flows. My love stands at this porous border, both mythical and actual, both mythical and actual. Engendered questions and conscience, engendered questions and conscience, holding a human right, holding a human right to self-determination. A body that searches beyond survival, in a body that searches beyond survival, in a path of human migration. My love stands. My love listens to the mystery of now, not knowing, not wishing, not wishing, not knowing. My love listens in full conscience to embrace courage, to climb the unknown terrains of hearts and souls through the dark that becomes light, through the dark that becomes light. In the waiting room, in the waiting room of patience, of patience, of patience, in the waiting room. My love listens. My love breathes in amongst words that express profound tender thoughts, between giggles and smiles that lighten the heavy moments of our lives, sitting in the sweet air of gentle nothingness, sitting in the sweet air of gentle nothingness. Unpolluted from the distant noises of a city in crisis, living in ignorance of what real peace means, My love breathes. My love sings this song of freedom, connecting my heart to each gulp of air that I breathe, an artery of loving exchange stretching from tip to toe, toe to tip, tip to toe, activating these thoughts to write these words that I share with you.
Super. Thank you. Hello and welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to launch the Fall Artist Focus with no one else than Carron Little, the organizer of Out of Sight Chicago first, the real festival, and Out of Sight platform. And so Carron is an organizer, but she's also an artist, a poet, and she's a curator, a researcher, a teacher. And so today we're really going to have a conversation, Carron, about your practice as an artist and as a, how can I say, a social, I was going to say a social gathering, because really gathering people socially through your art practice. So do you want to start by sharing a video first and then we talk?
Yes. Yeah.
How's that? Yeah?
Let's share.
You know what? I want to start again. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm just bringing it up anyway, so let me see. Yeah, but the dialogue and discourse between diverse groups. And Neighborhood Magic was a socially engaged project that I was invited to do in Beverly, in the south of Chicago. And so
good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Out of Sight series. And we are thrilled to launch this season with no one else than Carron Little, the organizer of Out of Sight, the festival, and as well the online platform that we've been sharing with you for 3 years, I guess now, through the pandemic and more. And so Carron is an organizer, of course, and also an artist, a poet, a curator, a researcher, and a teacher. And so today we thought it's kind of important, Carron, to also talk about your practice and how, well, from my point of view, I'm interested about how your practice in public space and socially engage art practice is linked with the way you organize and hold the space for people. So, yeah, I want to start by talking about that, this obvious or non-obvious link between the two for you.
yes, well, it really comes out of a commitment to a social practice and thinking about I grew up in a very multicultural environment laterally in Bradford, and I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of bringing people from different backgrounds together. And a lot of the work, that is the fundamental work that's being done. It's bringing people from diverse classes, diverse, races, diverse sexualities, to really kind of open up the dialogue and discourse between diverse groups. And Neighborhood Magic was a socially engaged project that I was invited to do in Beverly, in the south of Chicago. And so I proposed to work with people over the age of 70. And the inspiration for that project actually happened on the bus. And it was after the City Alive with Dreams project, where I'd interviewed people in Chicago about their sleep dreams. And so I was thinking about what needs to be the next project. And growing up in the queer community, I'm very conscious of the fact that within my lifetime, it has become legalized.
Yes.
And I thought it would be really fascinating to interview older queer people who lived through that transition, between illegality and legality. And so and so it was really quite special. But then I thought, well, America, this is a south suburb. Can I persuade them to, do that? But
that was in what year?
2015 to 2016. I did that project.
Okay.
And it, they kept inviting me back. The Queen of Luxuria is quite famous in that town.
So for people who don't know, we will see some videos later, but the Queen of Luxuria is a character that you hold for quite a while. And it is kind of a contradiction because you talk about or present a luxurious character, and yet you talk about inequality and sort of the sufferance of people socially, and the lack between classes. So can you talk about this decision to make this contradiction?
Yeah, so I mean, so the persona of the Queen of Luxuria really came out of my undergraduate research, thinking about homovestism,
Yeah.
and the sense of dragging one's own identity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm a second generation queer person. I grew up in the queer community. On my street, there was 8 lesbian mothers and all of their children, and I was one of them. So I did a lot with those. You know, that was the community I grew up in, and so so the Queen of Luxuria, you know, is a queer. It's really come out of queer traditions in the UK. Quentin Crisp, you know, the idea of the Queen, you know,
Yes.
with queer culture, you know, there is a queen, you know.
There's always a queen, yes.
Yeah, you know, so there's that kind of tongue-in-cheek happening.
Mm.
Then there's also this kind of celebration of, you know, what it means to be a woman, you know.
Right.
And, you know, yes, it's fabulous, it's pleasurable, it's beautiful, you know. But yeah, so it was thinking about, you know, female sexuality, you know, in the early days, celebrating that, and really kind of, and dragging it, you know. I never learned how to do makeup or anything like that growing up, you know, because I wasn't growing up in a normative household.
Yeah.
So, you know, I learned how to do makeup from a drag queen, you know, and so the neighborhood magic. So yes, I mean, I
It's
think
like waving things from how you grew up and the context, and how you're actually waving words with actions and colors and in all these sculptural forms as well. I suggest we see one of these, then people can know what we're talking about. I was noticing that also there's the absurd is really present in your work, as we could hear it with the beautiful poem that was read at the start. Here we are. There's a real rhythm and there's a lot of humor, I find also. I know that this is maybe a bit taboo, like there's something funny about this character. This is the Queen of Luxuria.
yes, yeah, this is one of them. I mean, I have a whole wardrobe.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I mean, my early work was very much thinking about the clown. And I actually studied, you know, I grew up in a, you know, in a space where, you know, I was really into people circuses. I was studying acrobatics, you know, I was really interested. And so I started to research the Native American role of a clown within the tribes, and how the clown was a person that would mirror society back to itself.
And bring people together also, yeah.
Yes, as a way of, you know, social creating social peace and social
Yeah, and laughter. Yeah, for sure.
yes, yes. So my undergraduate degree was all about this kind of clown. I called it clownetics in the 90s, and so I was making films where I was like pretending to, be Charlie Chaplin-esque, Buster Keaton-ish, and yeah, definitely. And I made 4 short comedy films back then. So I'm very comedy and this sense of play and the
Almost surreal. It's surreal as well. Now there's a surreal element. Just looking at this photo, all the people become surreal. Also, they're all part of the. We don't see individual. We see a character, right?
Yes, well, I'm actually showing this photo because in the foreground is Lyndon Sadler, who is the person that I was referring to earlier, who sadly has passed away now. But he is a really important figure in queer history and was part of the Coquettes in San Francisco, which was a live art troupe.
Right.
So he was one of the people that came forward and emailed me about wishing to participate in the Name Magic project. So he sent me this long email of introduction, and I was so touched and thrilled, because that's why, my initial wish to do neighborhood magic was to interview queer people. And
also because I've read that you said that that the core of at the center of your work is listening to people and listening to places, and I find it very beautiful to the neighborhood magic, because it's kind of a, tell me if I'm wrong, but it's kind, to me, I receive an image of extracting. It's an extraction of something, the beauty hidden in this was made in Chicago, and you've been talking quite a bit about the violence that's happening in Chicago, and how public space, working in public space and performing in public space can be a real challenge at times, and I can only imagine how to reverse the situation, right?
Oh gosh, there's so much in there to talk about. I really fundamentally believe and have witnessed through my years of doing public performance in Chicago is the and in Bradford actually how when I'm a fundamental believer in the theory of cause and effect. Create joy in the world, it expands. When we create hate, that expands too. And it creates, so, we can transform places through acts of joy and love, it is, and I just think about the days I was talking the other day with some students, there was a time when we all had our local Bobby, and we knew who our local police Bobby was, and that was a fond relationship. Whereas since the 1990s, the police specifically, in areas like Chicago and other American cities have become militarized. And that militarization is impacting our public spaces, and we're really at I fundamentally believe, and I've had these conversations, directly with the police actually in Chicago, and I've developed a relationship with the police as well.
Yes.
I mean, at the start of our performances, they wanted to cancel them, and then 5 years later, they're bringing us coffee. We're working with all these different, bodies.
Right,
It's a
right.
relationship. It's a relationship as well.
Mhm.
It's and it takes work, and it's a long process for us to really engage in how we can. And I'm really passionate about creating safe public space because, I was born in the States, but my parents are Scottish. And we initially lived in Glasgow in the 1970s. And that experience, of living in one of the worst housing projects in Europe, really informed and shaped my understanding of how places can shape a human being.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
And through the poetry, doing these socially engaged projects where listening to people's stories and writing poetry becomes a portrait of a place at a specific moment in time. And I've done them in various cities and neighborhoods now. I was invited to do one project in Lucerne in Switzerland with women. Yeah, it becomes a special portrait and, a means of empowering each person, but also, holding up a mirror about a place and time. And with the neighborhood magic and the way in which, it was supported by Beverly Arts Alliance. They're an amazing organization in Chicago, and they really supported the community engagement, and it transformed the community.
Absolutely. Well, usually if you hold a mirror, it can only lead to transformation,
Yeah.
First you need to look in the mirror and then hopefully there's a transformation. And this is really needed, in every moment in history. What do you say if we look at that work, on the video of this work, and then we can expand from there.
For peace, we listen to people, we sang for freedom. We walk for peace, we listen to people, we sang for freedom. We walk for peace, we listen to people, we sang for freedom.
Put it right here. This is our mailbox, and I'll give you guys one of these. This is all the information about our group and what we're doing today, and if you want to come see singing. Cool. There's actually going to be a choir arriving here in like 2 or 3 minutes if you want to stick around.
Moved to San Francisco, and I was visiting Berkeley, and I'm walking down Telegraph Avenue, which is the central drag of Berkeley, leading out to the university. And I had come from Atlanta, Georgia, because someone told me you were made to live in San Francisco.
There's, my children were born, when I got married, when I met my husband. Those were all memorable times in my life that I can't say that one particular thing, and maybe other people have particular things that were.
Well, just choose one.
Don't pressurize.
She just did. She said it was important when her children were born. So that's her important seminal moment.
Okay, thank you. And then, I think more important was when my children had children,
Yeah.
because
Yes.
you can be so much more easygoing, right? With your grandchildren, they're grand, as everyone who has grandchildren knows.
Moment in my life was when I met my soulmate, but I didn't know it at the time. I realized later, because when I married him, and we built a life that we really liked. You know, we were interested. We shared the same interests all the time.
I say I always inherited Dad's strong legs, because I remember when he was in his 80s, he was still crawling up the side of the barn and, you know, going over the side of the truck. This is out on the farm. I never thought much of it until I came to the city and realized not everybody can do that at that age. So I was very, you know, as I say, I guess I'm destined to run as long as I can, and I'll do it, God willing.
I lived in Beverly about 42 years. The first few years it was not so pleasant. It has become much more pleasant over the course of my lifetime here. I have two seminal moments, if we're gonna, and they revolve around life and death. The death was being in the hospital with my mother when she died. I had never seen anybody die. And so that to see the sense of person going from life, sort of a labored breath, to a death, and to see that absence of spirit was the first time I ever really understood what spirit is. When somebody dies, that spirit does in fact leave their body. And she was no longer my mother anymore, she was just a capsule. My other seminal moment, on the other hand, is 8 weeks ago I had my first granddaughter. So to see that new life come, and I have this crazy theory that when people die, the last thing they do is breathe out. And when a baby is born, the first thing she does is to inhale. And so I think that that sense of spirit pervades a family and invades a family. And the poem that they wrote about me was about my mother, and my sister's book is about our mother. So it's like full circle. So that's my big moment.
Yeah.
This poem is dedicated to Audrey's mother, and it's entitled Mother.
A Jew, an African, an Indian, we are all molded from this blood. We are all molded from this blood. We flow together. The river is deep. The blood keeps flowing. Our sisters and brothers, we keep mapping. We keep praying, we keep mapping, we keep praying, we keep mapping, we keep praying. Lemon drops and candy floss, writing the truth, the cold walls of hate, flow down the deep river. Blood keeps flowing, all our sisters and brothers, the beauty of the human race, weaving its global DNA. From one generation to the next, blood keeps pouring into our rivers. And still she stands, and still she remains. Each step a calling, each move a mission. Marching against fear, marking the red dusty road of US 51. The summer of '66, feet drumming in dust, clouding the chants, repeating lines down the chain of resounding calls. From Memphis to Jackson, signing of borders,
the first flag of freedom,
an integrated future.
we walk
For peace, we listened to people. We sang for freedom through lines of the National Guard.
This is marked our feet,
For peace,
dancing through in our
we listened
shoes.
to
The
people.
lines of exhaustion grip the groove in a kitchen routine. Cries grew, wobble there as water trickled down. Her nylon stocking reflecting centuries of racial tension.
leading to institutions,
We ran out as we marched,
walking through tears.
singing for change.
Wow, what a, it seems very contagious. The people around, you know, the older people that you were interviewing, and then they're sort of not part of the singing part, but they are part of the choral as well. So it really creates a sense of the collective, you know,
Yeah.
with the people who are the doer, let's say, and the people who are the viewer, but then they become, this idea of the mirror, right?
Yes, yes. And yeah, I mean the members of the choir, you know, were people from Chicago, more, you know, people that I've worked with before on other projects.
You all knew the people.
Not all of them. I mean, I'd always audition for performances, and I try and put a mix of professionals and people that don't have experience. So it was a real mix. But yeah, there were several people that I've worked with before on other projects. So,
And how long was this process for? It seems like a very expensive, like in a expand sense of the word.
so that whole process, I mean, it was kind of a miracle. I think I put it all together in like 3 or 4 months for the Beverly Art Walk. So I started doing the interviews in, I think it was June, July, August, September, and then it was at the beginning of November. So 5 months or 4 months. And so I interviewed so we put out an open call in the newspaper. And so people forward through the work that people did, and you know, we did a lot of work to make sure there was a diversity of people
and generation and stuff,
gender, etc. And people self-selected themselves. They opted in, and then they would call me on the phone, and we would have a conversation and arrange a time. And Norma Flynn, who's that last piece that you that was part of the video, she called me because her friend had seen the ad and recommended that she participate. And she said, "Oh, you know, how long is it going to take?" And I said, "You know, probably, you know, an hour or 2. And she said, "Well, let's just make it an hour. I'm very busy," you know. And I said, "Fine," you know. But in the end, you know, it ended up being 3 hours. You know,
yes, of course, because at first there's all the resistance, you know, like I have no time to waste. But then I guess for me, art is that the beauty of it is that it can stretch the time where people are getting involved and they don't know to which extent they're getting involved, but they are, you know. And I think this is what I'm observing that's really powerful in your practice in this social aspect, is that it really create connections. It seems to create connections further than the project itself, you know.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean the impact that this it had on the neighborhood. So there was
Yeah.
the initial experience. There was the initial one-to-one interviews with the public, and then I wrote the poetry, and then I would take it to rehearsal, and we would improvise 1 week, and then I would go away, listen to the improvisations, create the final score, take it back, we would refine it, and then we had a concert only for the participants and their families before it went public. So before the art walk as well. And also we had interim community gatherings in the process and the development of the work, where the participants who I interviewed to write the poetry selected the sites in the neighborhood where the public sculptures would be situated. So they chose the sites in the neighborhood. And, it was at those events, at those interim events, you're getting this transgenerational audience, because the curators were there with their children. So you're getting like all the generations of the neighborhood coming to these intimate events and listening to the stories of these.
Yeah.
And I mean, these 8 people, it shares the story of America, the US over the last 50 years.
Yeah, and also shares the story of all humans. I'm thinking about this woman who was talking about when she witnessed her mother died. It's very powerful, to have this consciousness of the moment where life is leaving this body, and then she says it's really well and it really human-like, Yeah, it's very powerful with the because it's not the first time we hear about this exhale, a last breath. And also she made the connection with the newborn taking everything in, right? So it's very powerful because it was an American woman, but it could have been an Indonesian woman for that matter. It's all the same, right?
That was actually Audrey Peoples, who was so the people talking at the beginning were all people involved who participated in the project. So first we heard Lyndon Sadler, and then there was another member of the public, I'm not too sure who she was, but she was a friend of Norma Flynn. Norma Flynn's next. And Connie, who was the oldest woman to run marathons in America, living in this neighborhood.
Also, it's very powerful to give a voice to these elders, where in this society that we live in right now, they don't have a voice anymore, because they're not of use, in the way we share the experience. So it's quite touching and intimate to see that they have so much experience and they have something to share, but you just need to open the ear and be there to connect with them, because they want to do it. They want to participate. So,
yeah, I mean, it was such a sacred, how often do we say to somebody, let me listen to your life. What has gone on for you in your life? And just take the time.
Right.
And when we do that, we can learn so much. I've personally learned so much from these people. Continue to learn and grow through doing this work, and I think I just had the philosophy, I'll just listen for as long as people need. That's what we need to do. And, I think the important thing about this particular work as well is it shared the history of the US over the last 50 years. Were involved in the civil rights movement.
Many things happen. Yeah.
In the March Against Fear in Mississippi, Lyndon Sadler grew up in the civil rights district in Atlanta, and one of the performers, who was Black, didn't even know that existed. So, and he lived on the street with Martin Luther King's Martin Luther King Jr.'s church. He lived with his sister, actually, ran a paper with her. So and then he was the person who moved to San Francisco. He was part of the Gay Liberation Theater. So there's all these
layers.
And this transgenerational audience, community was soaking that up. And now what we've seen is a whole generation of youth from that community who is queer, and that created the space for them to grow up safely and come out. And along with the, since that time that occurred, then we had more police. It's tragically, constant, but the police killings in 2015 in an adjacent neighborhood, and so people had the tools to organize and to talk and to facilitate discussions and.
No, I think that's it's a very important space to activate. This when art and the social comes together, and it's not one leads the other, is walking together and overlapping, and but still keeping the poetry. I think this is the strength I'm seeing also, is that the poetry remain,
Yes.
It's always a good question to ask, like, what remains, what transform, right? And art has this power, especially action art in public space. Like it's a way to get in touch, to touch others, close or far.
Yeah.
There's, of course, many ways of working in a public space, and but in your practice, you gather these people in a specific place, but then it's moving from that. It's almost like a core where the branches and can expand from there, right?
Yes. I actually use that as a structure, the web as a structure to develop the pieces over time. So, and I use that as a structure with the neighborhood magic. So in the first year, I interviewed those 8 people. And then the second year, when they invited me back, I installed the public sculptures in the garden of the Ridge Historical Society. And so the whole public could post their important life moments, and then they received poetry in the mail. So it was like expanding it out to everybody.
Yes.
I did this similar thing in Lucerne, Switzerland. I was invited in 2016, and I interviewed a core group of women between the ages of 20 and 100. And then when they invited me back in 2018 to perform at Words Festival, spoken word festival in Lucerne. And I used that method. I created a performance. Well, it's hard to see whether, it's a performance, but it's an engagement where I observed a plaza and I set up a table. I made a post box, a mailbox, and I invited the random public to stop and share an important life moment, and they posted those in the boxes. And then again, poetry was woven through the city while the spoken word festival was happening. So yeah,
it's like a resonance.
Yeah. But that was that surprise encounter.
Yeah.
And public in that context is.
It can go either way, but it's always rich. It's for sure, but it can go either way. It's the artist's body is quite vulnerable in that context, because you are inviting directly people to come. You can have all kinds of responses, so you've got to be ready for all. And you don't know how you're going to react to different situations.
Yeah. Actually, maybe this is a good point to move to
the second video. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's important we see it as well, just because you talked about the sculpture and something that's stretching out.
Right. Well,
direct engagement with one-on-one almost.
Yes, yeah. So this was it's actually a previous performance to this, but this was the third out of 3 performances that were part of the Uptown trilogy that was curated by Eden Foley, and it was a project that so Eden reached out to me and invited me to do a performance in a bank. And the bank manager was a little concerned about asking the Queen of Luxuria, what are you going to do? And so anyway, I'm very used to having these meetings now. So I said, I want to give people gifts. And actually, I think do we see it in the next slide? So here you see one of the performers writing a check.
So you gave some checks, right?
Yeah, so I made a Queen of Luxuria checkbook. And we calculated what people hadn't been paid during their working lives, racial, gender, and LGBTQ pay inequity. And so, for young people who came, we calculated what their student fees would be by the time they finished school, based on how much they'd increase in our lifetimes. So but let me maybe shall move to and share the film.
The video,
Oh, excellent! Good job! This card entitles you to a visit with the Queen of Luxuria.
A queen card, and this enables you to see the queen when she comes, and she'll be here in a moment. Otherwise, you can go and play another game.
You're trying to get it right there. Okay, here we go. Almost. One more time. And... Oh, very good. That's very close. This is a card that allows you to visit the Queen of Luxuria. So good.
This is truly an exciting day.
Yes.
As a retired person, how much would income bracket do you want this plate in that? So I'm going to add another 50,000. You need an extra 50,000. Did you write you a check today for 1 million? And what's your surname? Well, this is the bridge feedback. Well, thank you so much.
So it's got to be on there, not on here.
No, it can be anywhere on there.
Anywhere. Okay.
And it has to be a different color.
So what's it so that she used to try to set it up? But my next piece. No, Queen doesn't like this.
And put that in practice. And I enjoy the extra amount of change there. Thank you so much for that.
Why does he get like a bigger tax break or something?
No, I did have performances today. Well, enjoy. Thank you so much for
My queen, I can attest that this one has successfully been plastic.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe you can talk about this process, the one-on-one and giving money, money, giving, actually giving love to people, right?
Yeah, well, it was actually, so it was a mathematical calculation that I developed based on research that, the minimum wage, thinking about the minimum wage in the US being 80,000, if you consider healthcare, the fact that people have to pay for, student loans, or etc., etc. So, through that research and talking with people and finding out about people's own personal stories in terms of equity in that area, I developed this mathematical equation that would work out how much people had not earned during their lifetimes due to pay inequality. And so I created this board game, and there were different pieces, one for men, one for women, and one for trans. And so people popped their board pieces, choosing their own gender, or they placed their board pieces on the board, and then I would take a photo and document that board. And so it built up this picture of data over 2 days. And it, to kind of talk through the whole, so it was an interactive performance in a real working bank. And so I had 3 performers, Megan Mobadix, Natalia Nicholson, and and Olivia Stefanski. And the public would come in and they could engage with them first at these beautiful Art Nouveau tables. And then there was this island in the middle of this bank, of this Art Nouveau bank, where people could then come and see me for this final interaction.
Right.
And, it was really quite, and this performance occurred over 2 days during Open Chicago, which is where people can go to these architectural houses. And it was so, a member of the Rothschild family sat in front of me.
Wow.
And so I'm writing this check, she's like, I don't want to give you my last name. I said, well, if you don't give me your last name, I can't write you a check. And she was like, I'm a Rothschild and I have a bank. And I'm like, oh gosh, do you really need this? She doesn't really need all this money, but it was against my philosophy not to be, unkind. So I said, well, here's a little bit more cash to put in your bank. And she was most perturbed by the whole thing because she realized what I was doing.
Yes.
I was engaging people in a conversation about personal wealth. And it was really fascinating to look at the data. And I've actually got it in book form, and Eden has kindly written an
So
article.
you did an archive of all the project.
Yes. And it's, so what was revealed through the data of that project was that, the majority of people were earning below 30,000.
Of course, yes.
And women and a trans person were in the lowest category, which was 10,000 to 15,000
a year.
Yes.
Before deduction, after?
Yes.
It doesn't matter. Before, yeah.
Their annual income was between 10 and 15,000. And, you know, it was a real eye opener, and only 4 people were in the, you know, what I would consider to be minimum wage, which was 80,000.
Right. Amazing.
So, you know, it really spoke to the critical crisis that, you know, when we talk about economic precarity and how that relates to people's well-being, you know, it's fundamental. And, you know, we're really at, you know, if you think about kind of the trajectory and where we are going in terms of, you know, we're in a moment of technological acceleration where AI is potentially going to replace labor, replace our jobs.
Yeah.
Well, you know, if that's going to happen, we have to come up with a living income for people, just in order that we can create safe spaces and public, you know, safe cities. You know, we're really, so it's,
we're not even talking about artist life, because that's another category it's not a category, you know. So yeah, definitely there's a gap. There's many gaps in when it comes to the system that's actually created and people who can function in it, and other people who are just running. And it is also a mirror. It's a, you know, it's a very dysfunctional mirror.